Hi, it's Alexis, the avoidant therapist. Today we will discuss about attachment style, but from a hormonal point of view. I talk a lot about the psychology of attachment style, and I wanted to deep dive a little bit at the hormonal level and figure out whether being a secure attachment person would help you to manage your stress level. In other words, whether also if you have an insecure attachment style, you might have dysregulated stress level or cortisol level. Because if you do, and the reason it matters is because if you have dysregulated cortisol levels, your immune system might be affected. So not only you feel more stressed and your mental health can be affected, but also your physical health. So let's discuss this in a second. So the starting point is to look at the four major attachment styles. Secure being comfortable with closeness and independence. Anxious, craving intimacy, fear of rejection. Avoidant, they value independence. They avoid emotional dependence. And fearful, they both fear and avoid closeness. So high anxiety, high avoidance. So you might be familiar with those attachment styles. And these are the ones that they use to run this study at adult attachment style and cortisol responses across the day in older adults. So what I've done, they measure the cortisol level throughout the day amongst, I don't remember, 65 or 100 adults to determine whether throughout the day, assuming that they had similar days, people responded or their stress level were different. They should be the same, but when we look at the categories, whether a fearful avoidant will respond differently than an avoidant or than an insecure person. So the starting point is stress responses, we know that, are rooted in early caregiver interactions. So the way we manage the stress, the hypothalamus, is something that is developed at a very young age. And we know that attachment will shape, that's the assumption, will shape the stress response via the HPA, which is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. I'm going to explain that in a second. So you start from the hypothalamus and you go through the adrenal axis to produce cortisol. Okay, and so that sort of path, it's kind of developed at a very young age, and the way we interact with our primary attachment figure will influence how we develop this axis. And so the assumption is if you have a secure parent, if you have a secure attachment, you would manage stress better. If you don't, you will have a dysregulated cortisol level. So we'll be able to measure, looking at the cortisol level, whether secure people have a different response than insecure people. So it starts from the hypothalamus. Whenever you're under stress, the traumas are located there. And then it goes, there's the CRH, I love the acronyms because the terms are extremely complex to say, to the pituitary gland that will drive to adrenal gland and releasing cortisol, which will affect the immune system. Cortisol is not bad in itself because it's being stressed. For instance, when you wake up in the morning, you need to have a high level. I should have mentioned that before. You need to have a high level of cortisol to be alert, to be awake and start the day in the right way. What we need to see, the healthy way, the healthy cortisol levels, is that we need to see a steep downward hill, right? Downward curve. So you sort of de-stress throughout the day. So you have a high at the beginning and it needs to be steep. If you don't have high spike at the beginning, there's a problem. And if the curve is flat, that's a problem because you are constantly under stress. So morning, you wake up, you are alert, it's fine. That's what we need to do. But you don't have to be on the same alertness throughout the day. So how does it look like? In white, you have the secure attachment. Black, fearful avoidant. In gray, you have preoccupied. In dark gray, you have dismissive avoidant. It doesn't sound like it's a huge difference. The axis is not, they're not really helping in terms of seeing the differences, but there's a discrepancy, and I think it's enough to draw any conclusion. You see on the wake plus 30, all of them are quite high, except for the fearful. So the fearful avoidant, in the morning, they wouldn't produce enough cortisol level to be alert, to be awake. Okay, avoidant, preoccupied, secure, fine. Now, what we also have to assess is throughout the day, the one who keeps the level of cortisol quite high is the preoccupied. So you see, fearful, they start quite low, it's still flat, but throughout the day it reduces. Preoccupied, high, but it remains high. It's always the highest. For secure, you see quite high and kind of this steep curve. And for dismissive, it's kind of following a little bit the secure attachment. So therefore, people who have a dismissive avoidant attachment style, they don't have the same stress level. They have, the same stress response than secure people. Secure, healthy cortisol cycle, so sharp decline throughout the day. Now, anxious people, preoccupied, elevated cortisol levels all day, it's a flatter decline. The problem with this graph, you don't see that it's flat, but it's flat in a sense, like there's still a big discrepancy because the level, when you have like 9 instead of 9.5, or it's still a big discrepancy. Fearful, lower total cortisol output, flatter decline. They also measure the difference between men and women, and it seems that for women it's especially true. And for dismissive avoidant, normal cortisol patterns report of lower perceived stress. That's why if you're dating an avoidant, you feel like they're never stressed. What the hell, right? So in a way, and that's why also the problem with avoidant partners is because they don't feel stressed. The stress also helps you because it gives you a form of pressure of like, I need to fix this, I need to address this, right? When you go throughout the day and you don't have enough stress, especially when it comes to the relationship and the interactions, then it's harder to take into, to create change, to do something about it. And so, as I said in the intro, you have health implications when you have dysregulated cortisol. When you have high cortisol, it's linked to cardiovascular issues. So anxious, preoccupied, be aware of that. When you have low cortisol output, it's associated with immune dysfunction. So fearful avoidance. So at the beginning, they have low cortisol output in the morning. Flatter cortisol decline predicts higher morbidity for anxious, preoccupied, and fearful avoidance. In other words, insecure attachment, anxious or fearful avoidant, will increase or may increase long-term health risks. I make a lot of videos on the impact on your psychology, on the relationships, etc. But what is very interesting and fascinating is that it can also affect your health. Because the way we respond to stress, the hormonal response, will affect our immune system, will affect our cardiovascular system. Now, there are other factors that will drive the stress response. We see in this study that the attachment will influence the cortisol. Now, it's not the only thing in our body, in our life, that will influence on the cortisol. Factors like smoking, socioeconomic status will impact cortisol. And to me, it will impact even further than our attachment. But it's very interesting to understand that those insecure attachment style have a different profile, drive a different response. And that's why it's in the study they mentioned it's linked to poor emotional adaptation and social support use. It's very important to understand, there's other things in your life, your job, your parents, your families, that will also take into account on your stress level. But if things remain equal and you go on with your day, a regular day in your life, your stress response will be different depending on your attachment. So what do we do about that? The stress regulation depends on the supportive relationships and the attachment figure relationship that you have. So having a secure attachment partner helps you to co-regulate, helps you to drive new neural pathways. The thing is, and again it's mentioned in the study, and we know about that, avoidant and anxious will heighten the stress response. okay? Because you're going to have two extremes feeding each other's insecurities. Therapy can obviously help rewire both the attachment and the stress regulation. So that's what the work we do, myself and Elizabeth, is really also not only on the cognitive reframing, but it's also around emotional regulation, because they go hand in hand and one would feed the other. If you feel more secure, you have better stress response. If you also have a way to regulate your emotions, then your communication will be different and your sense of security will be different. So right now, if there was one thing you can prioritize, is to find that emotional consistency. So if you're dating someone who's not sure, giving you mixed signals, who doesn't want to commit, etc., that will feed this stress response. Okay, it's about finding the safe connection. The point is not to be in love or being hooked to passionate relationship, is to find a secure relationship where you feel safe. That's what matters. And that's what you need should you want to have ideal, optimal stress response and cortisol level. I hope that was helpful. Let me know if you want more videos talking about scientific studies, and I'll see you next time. Take care.